Yeah, I mean, I think it can be very dispiriting to think in this binary of like we either solve climate change or we're doomed.
Right.
And this all or nothing, sort of 0 or 100, apocalypse or paradise dichotomy is a false one.
It's not often that a single book completely changes the way you think about your work. But that's how I felt after reading marine biologist and policy expert Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson's What If We Get It Right? From the moment I put it down, I knew I needed to get this book for my entire team, and for every person in my life who struggles with climate anxiety, which is pretty much everyone. My name is Willow, and this is The Nature Of. Each week, we'll look to the natural world for insights into how to navigate the experience of being human. This week, we're exploring the nature of solutions. The way we talk about climate change and the stories we tell around it are often so focused on the problems. Even for me, as the editor-in-chief of a climate magazine, it's easy to catastrophize. Because, let's be honest, things are bad. Which is exactly why Ayana's work focuses so much on how we change that. Talking with her left me feeling grounded and empowered by all of the pathways that already exist to a healthy and livable future, and the role we can each play in getting there. So I want to throw one of your favorite questions from the book back at you, which is...
I hate when people ask my own questions.
I know. What are 3 things that you wish everyone knew about climate solutions?
I wish people knew that we basically have the solutions we need. Like, we do not have to wait for some fancy new technology. Like, we already know how to produce renewable electricity. We already know how to improve public transit. We already know how to green our buildings, right? We already know how to improve our food systems and to reduce food waste. There's not like a big secret about what we need to do. It's just a matter of how quickly we're going to do it, and you know what role we're each going to play. So the second thing would be like that there is a role for everybody, because addressing the climate crisis is so embedded in everything we do, in every sector, in every community. We need. So often it's thought of as like, okay, well, I'm not going to install solar panels, and I'm not an engineer, and I'm not a politician, but we need like project managers, we need graphic designers, we need like event planners, we need administrators. Like, there is a role for everybody. We need bus drivers, we need teachers, we need like medical industry involved
PR
in
people,
this.
storytellers.
We need PR people, we need storytellers. For the love of God, we need Hollywood engaged on this, right? We need pop culture. Like, there is a role for literally everybody. And this relates to probably something we'll talk about, but also like it can be fun to work on solutions.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't have to be miserable work. It can be like very creative and gratifying work that you do with people you like. And I think that's like a too well-kept secret.
And it's energizing.
Yeah.
It's empowering. Like, that was my biggest takeaway reading this book is I felt like I just had a renewed amount of energy. Like, it's fun. It should be fun. Why not?
I mean, there's a lot of emails involved. Like, it's not just pure delight,
There's
right?
a lot of Zoom meetings.
But there is this sense of like being part of moving our future in a better direction. And just the thing that I actually took away from not just creating the book, but creating the book tour around it, like deciding to launch with a climate variety show that involved a magician that I co-hosted with Jason Sudeikis, that had music acts, that had, trivia contests, that was really about like, how can we take the climate crisis seriously without taking ourselves too seriously? Yes. They're like, all the rules are made up. Like, we can actually approach envisioning and creating the future however we want. And I find that to be actually really exciting, that there is so much room for not just the arts in this. When people think about creativity, they think about, the formal arts. And,
Right.
if I'm not an artsy person, it doesn't apply to me. But I think creativity more broadly, like how are we going to get these solutions done?
Right.
Like there's so many different ways to approach it.
I think of creativity as being just something that humans have in common with nature herself, right? It's like she's the great creator. We are a very creative
giraffes
species.
and octopuses exist. So there are lots of different ways
Yeah.
to be a species on this planet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're a really creative species.
Yeah.
So let's use that for good. And something you do so well in this book is take problems, acknowledge that they're there, but turn them into possibilities. How do we as a culture shift from constantly talking about what's wrong to what's right, and how do we get there?
It's funny. My first response is like, it's so personal. It's so a matter of temperament. I mean, we all know cranky people who just always want to focus on the negative and I don't know. And then we all know people who are just so focused on the positive that they refuse to acknowledge how dire the context is, right? And I think, so one of the ways I did that in the book was with the title, right? What if we get it right? Framing it as a question. I mean, there's a question mark at the end, right? It's not like when we get it right. It's just like, let's think about this. Let's imagine a future we actually want to live in, right? The subtitle, Visions of Climate Futures, is an invitation to imagine a better world, essentially. It sounds kind of corny to say it that way out loud, but it is. Because you can't just imagine the future by yourself in the corner and then have it happen. It has, we're all have a role to play in making it real. But it's every time we think about the problems, we should also be thinking about what could we do about this?
Right.
Whether it's fast fashion or our food system or design and buildings and neighborhoods and landscapes, there's, or technology or finance, there are ways we can improve all of these systems from both, the personal and household and community levels up through government. So, I mean, that's really what I want to leave people with. It's there's so much that we could do. We do not have to wait for some magical solution. We don't have to wait for fusion. We just have to get to work.
Yeah, I mean, you say at some point in the book, I think, things just don't have to be this way. And that's a line that really sticks out, because that also, and again, speaking of the toxic positivity, that also should make you a little mad, right? It's
furious.
We do not have to be in this situation. There are so many ways out of this situation.
I think I probably wrote that sentence in reference to fossil fuel executives. Yes. I'm like, this was a choice that was made for us by a bunch of very rich, very selfish people.
Yep. And that should make you mad.
And that should make you mad. And remind us that if that was a choice, designing the world based on fossil fuels, then there are other choices we can make at any moment.
Yeah. Well, there's something you also say, so often the conversation is binary. Either we get the Earth to a place of apocalypse or paradise, without room for anything in between. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the middle place, because that's really what we're working toward at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it can be very dispiriting to think in this binary of we either solve climate change or we're doomed. Right. And this all or nothing, sort of 0 or 100, apocalypse or paradise dichotomy is a false one. And it's not really helpful, and it's really demotivating, because if you think, well, we can't get it perfect, then it's going to just, we're screwed, why bother?
Right.
Becomes the alternative. Right. And what is hard to get your head around and also a bit sad is that once you realize that we cannot have a perfectly pristine planet with 8 billion and growing people on it. The world has already changed. Climate has already changed. Now what? I think of this in a sort of 0 to 100 scale. Mm-hmm. Like if the worst outcome is 0, like no life on Earth, and we can imagine a paradise where every species flourishes and ecosystems are all intact, then somewhere between that 0 and 100 is where we're going to end up. Right? We're talking about hundreds of millions of lives that hang in the balance, literally, in terms of the impacts of climate change and extreme weather that we're seeing all over the world all the time now, in terms of species extinctions, in terms of entire ecosystems existing or not, in ways that are recognizable to us. I mean, as someone who, my PhD research was studying coral reefs, right? So this is all very personal. For me, as it is for everyone. And so I think a lot about those increments, and it can be sort of like, we're like incrementalism, it gets a bad rap, but I embrace it, because whether we have, 2 degrees Celsius of warming or 5 is a huge difference, right? Whether we have a foot or 10 feet of sea level rise is a huge difference. And so that's kind of how I think about these things, whether we have dengue and malaria in Canada or just in the South United States, like, is a significant difference. But like, these are the sorts of things that, we're facing and need to think about.
Well, the 0 to 100 framework is really brilliant, because it illuminates how silly it is.
Especially as a kid who was like, but like, obviously I want a good grade on this test. Like, how good a grade can humanity get on this test?
And it also, your mind kind of immediately goes to, if it's a question of, okay, can we save 70% of life on Earth, 50%, whatever. Imagine being like, well, it's not 100, so it's not worth it.
Yeah, I'll take a B plus, honestly.
Right. Yeah.
That would be great at this point.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, as a marine biologist, the ocean is a passion area of yours. So what are a few of your favorite ocean-based solutions?
So ocean climate actions, like scaling offshore renewable energy, which is right now primarily offshore wind, but others are coming online, like floating solar panels and tidal energy. There's all sorts of opportunities there. Decarbonizing shipping. Shipping, if it were a country, would be like the 6th highest emitter of greenhouse gases. Wow. Just because the fuel that's burned in shipping is very dirty typically. So figuring out how to decarbonize shipping is a huge opportunity. Eating a lower carbon footprint diet based on seafood. I think of that mostly as like seaweeds and farmed shellfish, oysters and mussels and clams. Everyone can eat with impunity because they just are filter feeders.
I'm sure some people will be happy to hear that.
Yes, eat all the oysters you want. So those all combined could be about 35% of our climate solution. So mostly when we think about the ocean, we think about the impacts of climate change on the ocean, which are awful. But there's also, we should be absolutely looking to the ocean for solutions as well. So for me, a lot of people think of now about regenerative farming as part of shifting our food system in ways that would make it more environmentally friendly. But regenerative ocean farming is a thing people don't really know much about, which is the seaweeds and shellfish. It's a thing we haven't gotten wrong yet. So it's an opportunity to more or less get it right from the start. Which is so different than like, how do we fix agriculture on land? Like, oh God, we have so much mess to undo, so many, processes and systems to like revisit and deconstruct and rebuild. Yes. Or the same with our electricity and our grid or our transportation, right? There's a lot to undo. Whereas there's some new industries that we can think about, like how do we get it right on labor? How would we make sure that coastal communities benefit from this? How do we think about who profits off of this and like what the whole supply chain looks like? There's just, how do we integrate offshore, ocean farming with wind turbines and protected areas and all of this kind of stuff. So that's one of my favorites, but also just the existence of coastal ecosystems like wetlands, seagrass beds, oyster reefs, mangroves. I mean, these are ecosystems that are protecting our coastline from the impacts of storms that are worsening because of climate change, and in many cases absorbing more carbon per acre than a forest on land.
Right.
So they deserve way more love.
And it comes back to what you were just sharing, that there's so much we can accomplish by helping nature just do her thing.
Yeah.
And I think people really don't grasp that. I mean, she's got some of the most incredible technology that we've ever seen.
I know. One stat that really jumps out to me is that coastal wetlands can provide better and cheaper shoreline protection than seawalls in many cases. People go straight to the concrete engineering solution. But during Superstorm Sandy here in New York and New Jersey, even though 85% of the wetlands in this area had already been bulldozed for development, the 15% that were remaining prevented over $600 million worth of damage.
Wow.
And so whatever is left, protecting it means a lot, right?
Yes.
Whether that's the loss of people's homes or infrastructure, in very practical ways, protecting nature has huge benefits to us.
Yes. And I love that you brought in the marine farming, because I think something that really jumped out at me in that interview too was that it's fairly easy to scale, right? I mean, it's something that's people can learn how to do. It can be replicated, and
it's actually a field that a lot of the new people going to that field are women, and a lot of them are queer women. There's like this independence of like making your own living out on the water, that drive to like create something physical in the world and share it. They're just, it was a surprise demographic.
Incredible.
Which is like great. Awesome.
Hell yeah.
And so, you know, the whole sector is like very flannel heavy. And so it's just been very interesting to see this field develop.
Climate solutions and flannel. It just goes together.
We'll take it.
Yes. And we're gonna talk more about some of the least sexy but most important part of all of this work, and I'm excited to dive into that. Before we do, I want to touch on tech-based solutions.
Okay.
I also wanted to talk about nature-based solutions first, but this is a contentious point, I think, sometimes within the environmental movement, right? Because there's weariness around jumping straight to tech-based solutions, and I think there's good reason for that. Where do you personally land right now in terms of how we answer the question of how much do we want to rely on tech-based solutions?
I mean, we need electricity.
Yes.
We need transportation.
Yes.
I mean, I guess I remind myself to think more expansively about what technology means.
Yes.
Like when bicycles were invented, that was high tech, right? And so, you know, we need high-speed rail in the United States, for the love of God. I mean, it's time. And I don't see that coming anytime soon, but like that's a technology we absolutely need, right? It's not just Silicon Valley kinds of, you know, digital app-based technology. It's not just nuclear and fusion kinds of technology. It's a much bigger category than that, you know, and so public transit and modernizing our electricity grid, you know, making sure that we actually have the transmission lines that enable us to bring the new solar and wind energy into the grid is something very boring that we need to figure out.
Right.
When I interviewed climate scientist Dr. Kate Marvel, NASA climate scientist,
the best scientist name.
I mean, also, yes, ridiculously good branding. Way to go, her parents. Her answer to like what is the least sexy, most important solution? She's like transmission. We need to figure out transmission lines. Like nobody wants them. right where they live, right? Figuring out how to do that, that infrastructure in a way that is efficient and just is something that like we gotta sort out sooner than later.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also, for me, a lot of it comes down to just trying to step outside of silver bullet thinking. You know, it's like when we think of something like carbon capture technology as like a silver bullet, yeah, that's scary because that can easily be a justification for releasing more carbon into the atmosphere, et cetera. And at the same time, we also need to remove the excess carbon from the atmosphere. So how can we think about all of the solutions as opposed to this is the one thing that will save us?
Yeah.
Which we don't always love nuance, unfortunately.
Well,
we love nuance.
Here we are.
Yes.
In the real world where that's just the way it's going to be. So,
yeah. And transmission. Speaking of the least sexy parts of this conversation, so something I really appreciate that you walk away from this book with is kind of shifting where people are investing their time and energy, right? Rather than just trying to be a good, quote unquote, like climate consumer, right? Changing your consumer habits to how do you be a good climate citizen? How do you get engaged with local politics? How do we learn about permitting? What advice do you have to share about getting engaged with the critical and less sexy aspects of this work?
I think I would say start local.
Yeah.
Like going to your city or town council meetings, getting a sense of like who's going to vote for what. You actually have a lot of access to the politicians who represent you that people don't take advantage of. My mother has, in the town where we live, just started showing up and asking about town planning and zoning questions. I mean, these are like active conversations in most communities. Like, if we're going to build more housing, where should it be? How do we think about the carrying capacity of this area? How do we set aside wildlife corridors? How do we think about investing in transportation that matches a growing population? Do we have enough drinking water if we build all these houses, right? These questions that, I mean, the people who are elected to your city council don't necessarily have a training in any of that. Right. And so just showing up and asking these questions can be very powerful, right? Because their job is to represent you and listen to your concerns. And it's much easier to flex your power as a climate citizen at a local right. level than it is at, say, the presidency, for many reasons. Or even with members of Congress. So I would just say to think about what local things are happening. And if you can show up to the meetings, that's the most powerful. If you can bring 5 people with you, even better. And get involved with an organization. I think people have this sense that being a citizen or showing up on this stuff means you have to do it alone. And I think that can be, I don't know, overwhelming, intimidating, all of that stuff. But there are local environmental groups basically everywhere. So whether it's a local chapter of the Sierra Club or 350.org or the Sunrise Movement, right? There's all of these existing networks you can plug into and find your people and see what you can contribute to that collective effort.
Right. Yeah, I remember there's a stat in the book about how many cities there are in America. I can't remember what interview this came up in. And it was like, if we get 5 people in each city.
This is Bill McKibben.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Who we were going to talk about. We love Bill.
There's about 20,000 cities and towns in the U.S. And so if you have just a handful of people in each town, like say 5 people in each town, going to the planning board meetings, going to the public utility commissions meetings, keeping up with and putting pressure on those local governments to do the right thing when it comes to climate, that can make a huge difference. And so Third Act, his organization, is actually training people to go to those meetings and hearings, to know what questions to ask, to think about what they want to advocate for. And I love that. Because if enough of us do that, that makes a huge difference. There's just no accountability at a lot of these levels right now because the public isn't showing up.
So everyone has their homework.
Yeah.
Grab a few friends.
I put him in the money section, the follow the money section, because he's been doing such incredible work leading on divestment and trying to shift what's going on Wall Street. And he reminded me actually that since the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015, like agreeing basically that we need to rein in fossil fuels, banks have provided $5.5 trillion in financing to fossil fuel companies. So I would say going in the wrong direction. With the top 4 banks alone, JP Morgan Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America providing more than $1.3 trillion in funding. This is like expand fossil fuel infrastructure. So if anyone listening has their money in any of those banks, just move it. There's a lot of better options. Bankforgood.org is a place to go and like research banks that are much more responsible. And it's the kind of thing that's a pain in the butt to move your money, but you just spend a day doing research and paperwork and then you're done forever and you don't have to worry about your money financing fossil fuels, because that's what happens when you have your money in the bank or in a fund. Some portion of it gets lent out to fossil fuel companies, and that's no good.
I'm happy that we brought in Bill McKibben and his interview because I wanted to touch on it anyway. We love Bill. Something he goes into in that interview also is addressing how much progress we can achieve within capitalism. And I wanted to point that out because I think we hear a lot within progressive circles of like, there's nothing we can achieve until capitalism is gone. And he points out that there are, many countries around the world, Scandinavian countries that, have achieved progress, but because there's also regulation. So I was just wondering if there's anything you could share about green capitalism and how we can think about what we can achieve within this framework that doesn't seem like it's going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, this is something that came up in a lot of interviews in this book, right? The sort of reality of the scenario we face is that we live within capitalism and we don't get to just stop working on climate solutions until we have a different economy.
Right.
Like where this is a race against the clock. How can we keep moving forward? Right. And so there's a little bit of like, we're just going to have to walk and chew gum on this one. And I feel like so often when we hear that kind of perspective that like, well, capitalism is dooming us all. So it's just very doomer, like fatalistic.
Right.
It's just, the thing that keeps I keep coming back to is like, there's a lot of quitters out there. Like, don't be a quitter when it comes to climate.
Don't be a
we
quitter.
Just don't give up. Like, that's a
on our
terrible
livable planet. Do
option,
not give up.
Right? Like, just don't give up on the future of life on Earth. And so if we take giving up, we take quitting off the table as an option.
Yeah.
That leaves us with, okay, this is the reality of the world that we live in. What progress can we make within this current reality while obviously trying to improve, the context within which we make future decisions.
Yeah, I'll never forget after the presidential election, the results came in, and one of the first requests for comment I got from a major publication was like, "Do you plan on giving up?" And I was like, "On life, on the planet."
I might take a weekend off, but
sure. I think a lot of where my head has been at is the question of just what can we do with the pieces that are on the board, and the board's not ideal right now. And also there's still things that we can do or focus on at the very least.
Absolutely.
I think we often talk about climate and the climate crisis more through this lens of are we screwed or are we not? Or are we in a good place or a bad place? But actually taking the moral framework of, is it right how we are in relationship with nature, is a powerful shift. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that. What possibility is there in achieving or spreading moral clarity within the messaging around climate.
Yeah, it's funny because like we were just talking about nuance before.
Sure.
And I think, yes, of course, embrace nuance, but also let's be clear that some things are right and some things are wrong, and some people have much more blame than others in this, right? And destroying the future of life on Earth is wrong. Making poor people deal with all the worst impacts of the climate crisis is wrong, right? Making communities of color deal with all the pollution of the fossil fuel sector is wrong. Driving species extinct is wrong. And I think it's okay to just have that clarity on some things, and that it is our duty as humans to help solve problems even though we didn't create them. Which is a bummer. I don't want to be cleaning up these executives' messes, but we've agreed that we're not going to quit on life on Earth, so here we are, right? And so that chapter is very short. It's like 2 pages. It comes out of a speech I gave at the Youth Climate Strike, Global Climate Strikes in 2019. When Greta Thunberg was in New York, there were like 200,000 or 300,000 people in the streets of Lower Manhattan. It was amazing.
Such a special day.
I was like the old person who was invited to speak at the youth rally, right? Which I'm very honored. Nothing like high school kids giving you any sort of stamp of approval. The toughest audience. And so so often people describe young climate activists as naive. And I just wanted to tell them there's nothing naive about moral clarity. Like, it is okay. And in fact, older folks need to be reminded that there is a right and wrong on a lot of this stuff. And the question is like, to what extent and how quickly can we rectify those wrongs? Right. Because I absolutely see that as a critical role for young people, is just keeping us all like focused on the big picture, keeping us honest about the stakes for their future. They're right when they say we're setting their future on fire. Yep. Like they need to continue presenting us these stark realities and holding older generations accountable for, honestly, like our failings to step up with solutions in a big way sooner.
Right. And I mean, I love that you framed it as the younger generation keeping us honest, and I think that there is something that is so clarifying about seeing this as a moral issue. I mean, there's a reason that kids skipping school around the world, because what's the point of going to school if there's not a livable future? I think there's a reason that really shifted the needle for so many people. I mean, we're at a point now where the main issue isn't climate denialism anymore, right? We're at a point where the majority of people are concerned.
The vast majority.
I want to end with the climate Venn diagram, because I think it's perfect invitation for anyone who is listening to this and wondering, okay, I don't want to sit on the sidelines. How do I get involved? Can you share about it? Or
even if you are involved but are like wanting to step it up, right? So this climate action Venn diagram came out of just being asked over and over, okay, I'm in, like, how can I help? What do I do? And it's such a hard question to answer, because I'm like, I don't know, I need to know a lot about you to answer that question. Because for so long, I feel like the environmental movement and the media, when they've written about what you can do, it's a very generic list of like, well, you should use your vote and donate and protest and spread the word and lower your personal carbon footprint, which of course is a marketing term invented by Ogilvy on behalf of like BP. So there's that.
The greatest scam there ever was.
The greatest scam there ever was, I am now convinced, is actually plastics recycling.
Oh, say that.
So the Attorney General of the state of California has now sued fossil fuel companies for pretending that plastics recycling works, because basically, like, it's very hard to make most plastic into a new plastic thing that's the same thing, at least, right? Like a bottle doesn't just become a new bottle forever in this closed loop, and we've given a pass to all this single-use plastic for so long because it had a recycling logo on the bottom, which the three arrows in a triangle with a number in the middle, it doesn't mean it's recyclable. That's just a symbol denoting the type of plastic that it is. And if it's not one or two, it's probably not getting recycled. And if it's one or two, it can only get recycled maybe once or twice before the quality degrades so much that it's useless. And so I'm really hopeful about this lawsuit because, all these corporations, I mean, like Coca-Cola is basically like a plastic bottle company.
Yep.
Right? And so figuring out how, and once we are, not deluded about that, we can start to think about how, we need to make changes in order to.
And that's why we need lawyers too.
Absolutely, we need lawyers. So yes, I think this is like one of the biggest frauds of greenwashing ever perpetrated on the public. Anyway, I will stop talking about that for now, and I will talk about the Venn diagram. So,
I am happy you brought it in because it goes back to what we were sharing earlier about so many people think their focus or their personal emphasis should be on recycling more and whatever else, but it's actually let's get your energy going where it will actually make
only
a
like
difference.
9% of plastics get recycled in the U.S., which is mind-boggling, and I think we shouldn't denigrate the role of individual household level action in reducing our waste. Our food waste, for example, is like a really big deal. A lot of that happens in the home, and if it ends up in a landfill instead of in a compost, it's releasing all this methane, which is a super potent greenhouse gas, right? That choices that we make as individuals certainly add up if we are riding our bikes, advocating for bike lanes. Like the more people that are like using these forms of public transit, the more investment there is in it, right? And the more people who are supporting brands that are, leading on sustainability, the more those companies can thrive. So our individual, the way that we, engage with solutions and, use our dollars and our voices absolutely matter. But if we get so navel-gazy about and so devote all of our climate solutions energy to just reducing our own impact on the planet, we don't leave anything left for engaging with policy and our city council meetings and our public utility commissions, which are deciding how quickly and how justly we make our energy transition to renewables, right? So I just want to encourage people to think bigger than themselves in all things. And so this Venn diagram has 3 circles. The first circle is, what are you good at? And the idea there is that you should be using the skills and the resources that you specifically have and applying those to climate solutions. So what a lawyer and a transit nerd and a designer should do are very different things. And I just keep wanting to put in a plug for like good project managers. Like we need great administration on this. Like we need the spreadsheet makers.
Yes.
We need you.
Because I am not one of them.
So whatever skills, resources, networks you can bring to the table, super important. The second circle is, what is the work that needs doing? So which are the particular climate and justice solutions you want to work on? And there are hundreds of them. If you want some inspiration of like a full list of solutions, go to Project Drawdown, drawdown.org, and you can see these are all solutions that exist already and you can contribute to. And then the third circle is, what brings you joy? That's what's going to keep us going in this work. Prevent burnout, etc. And so finding our way, each of us, to that heart of our own bespoke Venn diagram is the thing I would encourage people to do.
What are your skills? What work needs doing? And what brings you joy?
Yeah.
Perfect. At the end of each episode, I offer 3 prompts for guided self-reflection to help internalize and investigate how this week's themes show up in our daily lives, and how we can apply the principles discussed. I'd like to invite you to think about the questions from Ayana's climate Venn diagram and how they fit into your own life. Her questions are: what am I good at? What work needs doing? What brings me joy? Follow the links in the show notes for additional resources related to this episode. The Nature Of is an Atmos podcast produced by Jesse Baker and Eric Newsom of Magnificent Noise. Our production staff includes Julia Nat, Eleanor Kagan, and Daniel Hartman. Our sound designer is Kristen Muller. The executive producers of The Nature Of are me, Willow Deffabaugh, Teresa Perez, Jake Sargent, and Eric Newsom. Atmos is a nonprofit media organization focused on the cross-pollination of climate and culture. In addition to our podcast, we deliver award-winning journalism and creative storytelling through a biannual print magazine, daily digital features, original newsletters, and more. To support our work or this podcast, see our show notes or visit atmos.earth/biome. That's atmos.earth/biome. I'm your host, Willow Deffabaugh, and this is The Nature Of.